always had an odd relationship with my hands. I'm obsessed with how hands can convey emotions and express ideas, how they can dominate a conversation and pull people in. But recently, my relationship to my hands has become more complicated. I've started losing sensation in my extremities. I lose any sort of feeling in the cold. They hurt and they itch. It wasn't until I was about halfway through putting this piece together that I realized what it was. It was fallout from years of self-deprivation. Circulation to my hands and my feet is limited. I am always cold and always shivering. My joints click and my muscles are short. I am finally beginning to understand the effects of my eating disorder. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a musician. This lasted well into my young adolescence. And I idolized young adolescents like myself. Justin Bieber, One Direction. I wanted to be them. In my mind, there was only one problem. That was my weight. I started purging when I was in the 7th grade. The purging isn't what I remember, though. I remember having a breakdown every 3rd morning when I looked in the mirror. I remember trying on 5 dress shirt/sweater combinations before I settled for one. I remember this horrible little thing I did where I would stand in the mirror and look at my body from the side. I would run my hands along my stomach. I would pull down my shirt and I would cry. I would try on another sweater and I would purge. Looking back on it, the worst part of it all wasn't what I was doing, but rather why. It was so simple and so stupid. I wanted to be pretty. The next part is the part where I get lucky, where I'm one of the lucky people. I went to a nurse practitioner I could trust, and I knew she was able to recommend a psychotherapist and a dietitian and a psychiatrist. I was able to access all of these things without fear or obtrusion. I benefited from access to systems that I genuinely trusted and knew I could navigate. By the time I got to McGill, I was feeling better. I carried my experiences very close to my heart, but I let my insecurities go. It was these experiences, along with my untamed ambition and my neurotic need to prove myself among a group of intelligent young people, that drove me to this issue.
True, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest the treatment should be, first of all, multimodal. It has to include psychological components, nutritional components, educational components. And there is evidence also to suggest that specialized treatment is more effective than non-specialized treatment. It will usually include a number of things. The key thing is helping people reevaluate their beliefs and values around eating, weight, shape, control of these things, since eating disorders invariably are about overemphasis on maintaining thinness and stuff like that.
Right.
So a part of it is helping people reevaluate their beliefs or their cognitions around these issues.
It was actually a program within our health services, our mental health services. And the rest of student services, our mental health related services don't have this type of a big actual program that would take a student from start to finish. So that is what made it unique.
It was the only program that would take students from start to finish. It was comprehensive and immersive and centralized. That's an important part, centralized. I was lucky because I was able to access a nurse practitioner. I was able to navigate the systems that were presented to me because I knew them so well. I felt so comfortable in them. It was clear to me, and I was resolute at this point in my research, that this program was important. I was yet to understand how truly vital it was for a lot of people.
Everything takes so fucking long at McGill, right? You go in, they're like, we don't have anything for 2 months, and you're fucking desperate, so you book something anyway, and 2 months later you come in and you see someone, and they assess you, and you answer like a bunch of tests and do a bunch of questions, and you tell like 3 different people your histories, and then they're sort of like, all right, like, you seem like a serious case, you know, you have childhood trauma and clearly an eating disorder. I guess we might have room for you. And so a few months later, they were able to fit me into the actual program, which then started to help. But it took, like, from realizing that I needed help to the time when I actually got into the program was like a solid few months where I was just like left to fend for myself. Do better. But then once I was actually in it, I was amazed at how well coordinated it was. There were sort of 4 people on my team, but the person we saw most often was our therapist. I think that I saw every other week, if not every week. And she was amazing. Ellen was so nice. And really, like, wouldn't let me get away with anything, you know? If I said something that she didn't feel was representative of what was going on, like, she would call me on it. And it really helped us, like, get to the heart of what was happening. And so even just through those few months of counseling, it really helped me not define my life by that. I'm gonna cry now. But yeah, it really helped me to sort of stop defining my life by what had happened before.
The vitality of this program had never been so clear to me. It taught and it healed, and if a student was left without it, they may just be wayward, just lost. It was really difficult to hear the story of a student who chose to remain anonymous when she told me about how she hadn't actually been accepted into the program and where that left her.
In September, I went to go see them, and I wanted to be basically enrolled in the program. But after their evaluation of me the first day, they came back with the results. They weighed me and they told me that my BMI was too low for them to take me in. They said that they didn't have the proper resources and staff and facility to provide for me, so they redirected me to other private counselors and psychiatrists that were quite expensive and quite far also, so just not really reasonable options for me. I'm pretty much independent and alone here, and to be turned away when you're, seeking for help, it's kind of like a slap in the face. So it was quite shocking. Yeah, that kind of honestly just didn't really motivate me even more so to seek help. It's kind of like a setback. So I didn't really address anything until the fall, a couple months later, that I did decide to go see someone privately for a few sessions. And yeah, that's kind of what happened, but not too much was done.
Students were kind of self-selecting whether to go to mental health services or counseling services. So we merged mental health services and counseling services, and separated out the psychiatrists, because psychiatrists are normally a very, it's a, by referral only. You know, a student wouldn't say, oh, I need to go see a psychiatrist, right? Usually it's through a referral process that a student would see a psychiatrist. The EDP program was kind of stuck in the middle because it had therapists, so counselors, and it had psychiatrists. And so my recommendation was that we work through the eating disorder program through the collaborative care model, right?
We work from what we call a stepped care or sequential model, because it's hard to predict what people are going to need. You know, severity of symptoms, comorbidity, all kinds of things, the chronicity of the illness do not strongly predict outcome. So what, you know, we often prefer to do is to let people enter into a sort of a whole menu of different treatment options and see how they respond. And, you know, people respond to lower intensity treatments, that's great. If they don't, then you can sort of step up.
At this point, it seemed to me as if the eating disorder program had been dismembered by change. And I totally understood why that change happened. Consolidation and improvement. The stepped care model had value. But I also think that there is something to be said about one program, about something centralized. I think that though all of the pieces are there, they may be daunting. It may just be too scary to approach such a complex system when you don't know where to go, when you're directed to all these different places. But I understood. I understood some of the circumstances. I appreciated rejigging the system. What I didn't understand was how a change in circumstance left the program in pieces.
Some of the years it was about $700,000 to run that program. Average was about $500,000 to run that program because of the heavy resources needed, right? You know, last summer when we started really looking into those numbers, it put up a bit of a red flag for an average of 70 to 75 students a year going through that program. It's a pretty high price tag. There's no way we're going to reduce our resources for students, but we do need to take a look at how we distribute those resources in a way that meets the needs of 40,000 students, and not simply 70 or 100 students. And I know that sounds terrible, and believe me, I have a daughter with an eating disorder, and you know, for you know, when you're a senior administrator and you're needing to make these, you're having to make these decisions about the use of limited resources, it's not easy. But I think that we have a plan moving forward, using the resources that we will be and have been saving, that will impact much larger numbers of students at a much earlier time in their, you know, before they get to the point where they need an actual treatment program.
Ms. Gauthier was right. Those decisions are unfathomably difficult, and they are not something that I have ever come across. I appreciate that there is an investment in giving the most students care possible. I understand that it is difficult to justify such a high price tag for such a limited effect. I understand that in the heart of many people in the administration, their goal was to make everyone's life better. They have the best interests of their students in mind, absolutely. But they need to provide to so many people. But I don't know if that's enough. I don't think that people are going to benefit in the same way from scattered pieces. I think that there is something valuable in a central system, a home for you to heal. Recently, Student Services announced that it would be investing $13 million over the next 7 years into students' mental health. They have a mental health action plan. They have plans to renovate the space so that it is more streamlined and accessible. And I appreciate both those things. Thank you. But this is also an opportunity. Something genuinely helpful to students is scattered. Whether or not you can create something that looks exactly the same is irrelevant, because this is an opportunity to pick up the pieces and put them together.